right. Good evening. My name is Nolan Hesse. This is a Letter to the Left podcast. If you guys have been watching my podcast before, this is all about kind of the modern events and what's going on in the world today, and then like actual conceptual, ideological things that people believe in. And my whole purpose here is to try to offer a more middle of the road, or at least a olive branch, if you will, to try to talk to people and help also those people understand why the right believes what they do, what the left believe that they do, and what's the actual, where's the discontent coming from? Because it's starting to get kind of ridiculous, to be quite frank with you, how divided this country has become and how almost hysterical one side is over the other, especially when it comes to allegations of totalitarianism, which then they go right back around and do that. So that's why it's titled Letter to the Left. And today, it's the fifth podcast, and today we're going to go over immigration. The idea of immigration, what immigration entails for a country, what exactly do both sides, for example, think of the immigration that we have. And it's not just legal immigration, it's just a concept of overall mass migration. We have had a string of almost 2 decades now of almost unenforced rules and laws when it comes to migration and immigration, and it has caused a complete disarray of our economy and our housing market, as well as a huge divide between both political sides in the political spectrum here in America. The reality is that immigration has become out of control, both legal and illegal, but mainly on the illegal side, and it stems from multiple different things. The reality of it is there are advantages to having immigration, right? And that comes from like, hey, more diverse culture, more people to bring talent and skills and stuff like that, create usually a better economy over time. It helps with population boom, and it helps with a lot of things, right? The problem is when you overdo it too quick, too fast, it becomes a culture shock, especially when you're talking about counterculture. You hear a lot of the times the phrase, well, we're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation of this. It's like, but these immigrants were different. Back in the 1800s, and I mentioned it before, immigrants were not coming here to bring their culture and their society here. They were coming here to become American and to leave that land behind. They uprooted everything that they had and brought it here to create a whole new life. That's kind of the difference, because the immigrants today really don't do that. They bring a lot of their culture here, they bring a lot of their customs here, and that's okay. But when you demand that people then um, essentially try to accommodate your customs and courtesies, and then you completely ignore the very country's custom and courtesies that you live in and their laws and stuff like that, just because you may not believe in them or it's not normal from where you come from, that's kind of where we're at, because that's exactly how a lot of the immigrants today believe. They believe that we should be accommodating them. They believe we should be paying for them. They believe we should, no matter what, they could do no wrong, and that they are essentially able to do whatever they want, because you always hear the communist background when it comes like, this is stolen land anyway, like all that stuff. That's just communist agitators. You have to ignore that. But even when they come like talk about like, hey, this is, I'm speaking Spanish. Like when you're here for 30 years, for example, even if you've been here for 30 years, right? Because you always hear the mainstream media talk about abuela who's been here for 30 years, and she doesn't know how to speak English. If you've been here for 30 years and you're in a country that you didn't bother to become a citizen, where it's a law to become a citizen, if you want to live here, and then it's also a law, and like, well, it's not a law, but like you didn't even bother to learn the language, that's a problem, right? That is an objective problem. Again, if you reverse this, and I talked about it in my last podcast, if you reverse that construct, and I sent 20 million white Americans down to Mexico and said, Mexico, you have to pay for their health care, you have to pay for their housing, you have to pay for all this stuff, their groceries, and then they're never going to learn Spanish, and they're never going to work with your country and your laws. They're not going to obey your laws or any of that. They don't expect to, and then they're also going to send all the money that they make there up to America. You guys would be having fits. So that's kind of like the discontent, right? But the discontent's interesting because when you break it down, there's one side that is pretty much apologetic to illegal migration, any kind of migration, all that is the left. Why is that? Well, first of all, it's multifaceted. There are, for the last several years, young men have been trending to the right, specifically young men. Historically speaking, for the Democratic Party or the left in this country to survive, they've had to, for the last 40 years or so, they've had to rely on children of immigrants specifically. So, like, over 70% of children of migrants end up voting Democrat through their lifetime. That's pretty much it. They want a new voting base because they saw the trends in 2014, 2015, and they kind of foresaw what was happening with Trump, that, oh, we're going to lose. It doesn't matter how great we think Obama was. We are going to lose. And that's exactly what happened. That's precisely the reason that we're in the situation we're in today. When it comes to immigration, is now you have this young generation, specifically of men, who are tired of it. They have immigration fatigue. They're tired of having to accommodate to people who don't live here, who don't care about the custom and courtesy of America. They don't care about speaking our language. And to be quite frank with you, a lot of them believe in the construct of completely overhauling what we believe in, and our way of life is stupid and that they need to come in here and change it. That's literally what it is. You hear it all the time that's more common, not so much with the Hispanic community, but mainly like the African and the like the Islamic based countries that immigrants come from there. Is like they truly believe that they have a duty to come in here and completely change our culture and our way of life. So they deliberately try not to obey our laws. They do not do any of that. They don't follow our customs. They don't follow our courtesies. In fact, they try to even instigate. You're seeing in Europe with the Islamic migration right now. You're seeing them in the Christmas markets, which if you haven't been to Europe, Christmas markets are huge. They go like through the whole Christmas season. It's a huge cultural thing there, and you have them literally storming these Christmas markets and halting them and stopping them and burning down Christmas trees and stuff like that because they believe that their job is to change it to a Islamic country. It's that simple. It's period dot. And they're trying to do the same thing here. Make no mistake. And that needs to be said because there are a lot of people who are almost delusional to the reality of, hey, these people don't like me. You see a lot with the left, especially feminists. Like they're like crazy apologetic for illegal migrants in general because we have some sort of distorted idea that all these people are refugees or asylum seekers, which is just completely false. Like even like asylum seekers were literally going on the southern border doing interviews with people down there and journos down there, and they were showing them the scripts that the cartel members gave them to certify that they would be caught and then given a phone and then released into the country without any tracking or anything. So like that's kind of where it comes from, and I hope the leftists are more in here to listen to this because it's like, hey, this is exactly what's going on. And I know you don't want to understand that, you don't want to believe it, but the left is on the wrong side of history here. All right? This is one of those big topics that they've completely blown it up on. If you were to ask 10 years ago what you thought about mass deportations, it was like in the 30th to it was like 30% in favor of mass deportations. That was in like 2017. In 2014 or 2024, that number has been 70 plus by pretty much every polling for that election cycle. That's insane. And it shows. I mean, it shows. The counties in the south of Texas that border Mexico have not voted Republican since 1896. They all went Republican. Every single one of them. They're the closest to the fiasco that was the border, the craziness that was the border. I don't know what else to tell you, right? People do not like, especially illegal migrants. People really don't like migrants anymore. And that's not just a white people thing. That's an American thing now. Because they're tired of it. They're tired of the entitlement of these migrants who come in here and don't offer to try to fix anything. And most of the data economically suggests they're also not like contributors. They're not huge contributors. Like they're mainly like welfare state, live off of that. I mean, it's true. And it's in the Bureau of Economic Statistics. You can go quote that. You can go see that. And for the last, 10 years, migrants, specifically from African countries, Islamic countries, and then Mexico and some of the South American countries, specifically, they have been living off of welfare and they have not tried to get off of it. That's the problem we're dealing with. And that's one of the reasons it's completely flipped on its head, especially with the younger generation. And the reason why is because the younger generation is here trying to get homes, trying to live a life that their parents once lived with them, and they're not able to afford it because all their taxes are going to subsidies that are going down either to welfare of people who don't care about your culture or your country or your city or your whatever, but even people who don't care about any of that are completely riddled with fraud. I mean, we're looking at it right now live with the Somali thing. The interesting thing about the Somali fraud, that has been countrywide. That is countrywide, and that has been going on for over a decade. 2013, 2018, and 2022, and 2024. Minneapolis has encountered Somali fraud and nothing has been done about it. It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars in the last 10 years. That I'm not even scared to say it. That is a legitimate Somali thing. Like it's an African thing. Like African countries and people from Africa, they don't consider that corruption. They don't consider fraud necessarily a bad thing. Right? Like you talk with a lot of their world leaders in African countries that are poor and they're like driving some sort of Bentley, like the leader, and like his country is poorer than dirt, but he's like rich. And that's because he says he's like, corruption is only okay. I mean, there's a famous quote, corruption is only okay when I'm involved. Like that's a legitimate mentality of a lot of African cultures, to include Somali. So like when people are like, oh, like, first of all, when the left is like grasping their pearls and being like, oh, they're innocent, it's like, you got to knock that off. You're going to kill your party because like the Somali fraud is one of those things that's going to keep going, and it only gets deeper. It's constantly going to get deeper. We've seen this before. This is big enough, and it can get big enough to lose you a midterm. That's a fact. Like, there's nothing the Republicans can do to destroy their midterm hopes, like the Somali fraud and the liberals coming to the aid of Somali fraudsters for some reason. Like, this isn't even accusations. This is real. Like, this is objective. This is riddled with fraud. And it's not the first time. Like, this is not some sort of one-off thing where the Republicans are just targeting and this journalist from YouTube is just targeting these Somali daycares. Like, no. This has been a thing for a while. This came out prior to him doing that. He just monetized it and commercialized it on YouTube. He is responding to literally the last 3 years of investigating where they found these daycares and the autism scandal and all that stuff in Minneapolis where it was accounting to billions and billions of fraud. That is where that came from. That's all he was doing. He was just responding to those articles and that investigation and those investigations. But y'all lost your mind thinking he was just making that up. Like, that's where that came from. So I don't know what that's about. Y'all got to fix that. But the left wants it because they want a new voting base. And that's why you see them bend over backwards for all these Medicare, Medicaid. You saw Gavin Newsom in California. Medicare, Medicaid for illegal migrants in California. The vast majority of you Californians who are born and raised Californians are, middle class? You don't qualify for that money. But freaking Jose here, who came across the border, he just got here. He has no skills or anything, and he doesn't care to have any skills. He can live off the government for how long he wants in California. That's what Gavin Newsom did, and that's what Tim Walz, same shit. All these liberal mayors, all these liberal governors, they're all doing the same shit. They're trying to take care of their voting base. That's why in Minnesota, Walz isn't resigning. He's just not running for re-election. But all that, they're in on it because that becomes campaign money for them. That's exactly what that is. It becomes campaign money for them, which is why they're not speaking out, which is why they keep on denying it. That's why these liberal politicians are constantly almost delusional in the reality that they're just like ignoring these huge red flags, and they're always taking the wrong side on it because they're getting money from it. Make no mistake, Biden and the Democrats the last 4 years, remember, pretty much from 2021, the border was chaotic. And they kept denying it pretty much until 2024, until that survey came out showing like, dude, people are not about, like, one of the biggest things of that election cycle was border security. And then they started seeing all these surveys of people want mass deportation, and all of a sudden then Biden and Kamala specifically started talking about, well, started talking about how immigration's huge for her and all that stuff. No, that wasn't. That was never that way. They didn't care about it then. They still don't care about it. They knew what they had to do. They had to let people to make a new voting base. It's period dot. It's clear as crystal. And you hear things like from Kamala during that time. What'd she always say? Right? It was always, well, you have a immigration system that is broken. And that's a bullshit lie. You just weren't enforcing the law. Then they weren't. They were choosing not to enforce the law. There's documents upon documents upon documents upon documents of Border Patrol and Immigration Customs and even the FBI, the DEA saying, like, we're being told to stand down. We're being told to stand down by this administration when it comes to prosecuting illegal migrants. Look at Diego Garcia, that dude we tried to deport. Even now, all the injunctions, even now, that's all, it's coordinated. This isn't and by the way, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just reality here. They need those votes, and they need those voting base. That's why they made such a big deal about voter ID, which is very common sense. I talked about it in the last podcast. They made a big deal because they realized, oh shit, well now our illegal migrants can't vote. So now we have to work to annex them. But we can't just openly and overtly annex all of them, because then everyone's going to riot in the streets and completely toss us out. That was the whole point of that. That's why the blue states remain no voter ID laws. Because they know if they do that, they lose. It's not a coincidence. It's reality. So that's exactly why they did what they did. And again, the last border crisis, and they denied it until it became politically useful for them. But by that point, no one was buying their shit, right? And it is what it is, because the contrast to that is when all these liberals during that time were saying, well, we can't do anything without Congress. We can't do anything. Well, here's Trump. Comes Trump again. Shuts down the border. Literally no one is coming in illegally. They have not had a single got away. Zero. None. Nada. None. They deported, 2+ million people? A lot of that's self-deporting, but that's a propaganda campaign that is shown to work. I talked about it with my right-wing friends who say they're not doing fast enough. Like, this shit takes time. So in the meantime, you do walkthroughs of swamp detention centers, like in Florida, right? They do all these Twitter videos of going to catch them all with the Pokemon theme song. They show soldiers at the border. Like, all that's propaganda. They're doing that on purpose. They want to deter that, because how you slow it down is exactly how they did it. You say you are not welcome here. That is how you fix out-of-control migration. You're not welcome. If you come here, you're going to waste 10, 15, 20 grand, whatever you paid your cartel guy, whatever you pay your coyote, you waste that money, because once you get over here, we're going to catch you, we're going to deport you immediately. That's what they're doing. And it's working. The border is completely secure. Again, this is why even Gavin Newsom, Bernie Sanders, they all came out and said we have to have a strong border. We have to. Because they knew the writing on the wall. The Democrats will never win another major election again if they keep this open borders style policy. And they know that. They know it's absurd. Again, all they've had to do, even with the majority, was say, okay, well, eliminate the border code specifically where it says that if you are an illegal migrant or you cross the border illegally, you are subject to detainment and deportation at any time. All I do is change that. They will not, because that will cost them elections. Because they know, again, if you do that, you do not have enforcement of a border. If you do not have enforcement of a border, you don't have a border. If you don't have a border, you are not a sovereign country. If you can't enforce that, and you can't kick people out of your country that come in unwanted and illegally, that don't respect your laws, your baseline laws, that's an invader. Then anyone can just invade your country. Anyone can just invade your country. That's why it's so hypocritical when you hear liberals talk about Russia invading Ukraine and the U.S. kidnapping Maduro. Like, bro, and all they talk about is sovereign borders, sovereign countries. Like, you don't even believe in that. You don't believe in any borders. You get what everyone else gets borders, but America, they don't get borders. They're the only ones who don't. Not a single American person gets borders to enforce, but everyone else gets a border that you believe is a sovereign nation. Get out of here with that. And that's one of the reasons, again, it's a perfect example, and you see that all the time with liberal ideology. It's constant. It's constant it's a constant just hypocritical ideological constructs. It's just it's insane because everything is two-faced and double standard. So, again, that's how you properly slow it, is exactly what Trump's doing. You show that you're not welcome. You enforce the laws of this nation. And then if they still decide to come illegally, you deport them. Because then they waste that money. And they realize it's a waste of time. The reason why we had so much out-of-control shit, one, just because they were giving all the incentives by not deporting them and then giving them free healthcare, free Medicare, free housing, free groceries. That happened, by the way. All you liberals out there that are shaking your head, nothing happened. It's like 100% it did. It's all over. I know your politician pundit wants to say it. You can literally Google it on every account. That happened. But that wasn't just it. It was because these buddies were coming in here and they were like, hey, yeah, I just made it across the border and now I'm going to call my, 12 brothers and be like, hey, got in here. I'm fine. I got Medicare. I got grocery card. I got a little apartment that I live in off the government's dime. Yeah, you guys should come. And that's why it exploded. Because they talk. So you have to make them unwanted. You have to be like, hey, you're not welcome here, man. And that's how you do it. Exactly how Trump's doing it. It's, again, pretty much the only thing that Trump is truly good at is border security. He's okay at economy, but he needs to work on some of that. So I kind of went into why is it necessary to preserve the border? Because, again, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. You're essentially allowing invaders to come in here. And don't get me wrong. That's exactly what we had. Like, all those people that just kept breaking the law. Even when, remember Kamala's famous speech, do not come. When they realized, like, oh, shit, like, we fucked up, do not come. And what happened? Consecutive months, over years of monthly records being broken. Because she may have said that publicly, but her administration then were telling the enforcement to stand down and let these people come. To the point where even they were going against that and lifting the sea wire, lifting the gates and putting down the gates to literal people who were rushing the border when that's like illegal as fuck. So like, again, liberals, you guys need to come around immigration. No country in their right mind had that 4 years of immigration that we did. That's insane. Like 20 plus million is estimated to be in this country illegally. You don't know who the fuck they are. The vast majority of them came from other countries that were not Mexico. Like, you want to talk about refugees or asylum seekers, why not seek asylum in any of the 12 other countries that you traveled through to get here? Why not? You're telling me that you were seeking asylum from 12 other countries? What about the Chinese nationals? What about the African nationals? What about the Islamic nationals that literally flew down to South America, to Brazil, to Argentina, to any of those countries, and then traveled their happy way up 4 or 5 other countries to get to Mexico? To go, why not seek asylum in any of those other countries along the way? Because that's not the point. The point was invading. It was an invasion. Weaponized immigration, something you all need to look into. It's a legitimate tactic used by our adversaries. And if you do not think that Russia and China are participating in maximizing weaponized immigration against liberal administrations, knowing that you guys are just going to sit there and turn a blind eye or stick your head in the sand knowing that you don't want to hear it because you can't stand the fact that someone may call you racist. And I talked about it in my podcast, these immigrants, they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about your kids. They don't give a fuck about your livelihoods. They give a fuck about them and making money. If you do not think that they know to call you a racist knowing that you'll shut up, you're wrong. They know that if you sit there and you call them out, the first thing you're going to do is like, that's racist. Because they know and they've seen it over years and years of you essentially just caving to anyone who accuses you of racism. That's what they do. You saw it with the Somali fraud. When it first got called out this next time around, this 18th time around, it seems like, the very organization sent out their first statement and it talked about racism and how this is based on racism and everything is racist and all these people are racist. That's all they do because they're smart. They know what they're fucking doing. They're not stupid. You guys act like you liberals. You act like these people are dumb. You act like these people are like these, oh, they just don't know how to speak English. They know all this shit. They know what the fuck they're doing. Okay? So knock it the fuck off. You're going to have a strong border, and you have to have a strong border policy because no one's going to follow you otherwise. That's what lost you the last election. It's going to lose you every election till. All right? No one wants open borders. Everyone's sick of it. Everyone is seeing what's going on in Europe right now. No one wants that here. All right? So you got to figure that out. So I kind of went into a lot of that, like the preservation of the border, and I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it was necessary to kind of get the glimpse of what's actually going on here. But I also wanted to touch like why the left are propagandizing it. You always see on media, right? They always pick like the one spare, like innocent bystander, or the one abuela of 20 years, or someone who is a legal migrant, but they got snapped up anyway because they thought their papers weren't in. And then that's the only ones they talk about. They never talk about the 10 to 20,000 per one of those individuals, like the actual quote unquote innocent, which if you cross the border illegally, technically you're not innocent. But the quote unquote innocent ones, nor the 20,000 plus people that are known killers, murderers, rapists, stuff like that. Like, it's astounding. You actually start diving in to that paperwork and those numbers and that data. It's actually crazy. It is phenomenal, the delusion of the left and the media on how they're trying to portray this ICE stuff. To the point to where citizens think they have an obligation to attack federal law enforcement in the middle of executing their mission. That's insane. That's actually insane. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand how stupid that sounds? That is literally delusional to think that you have a right to stop federal investigations because you think that, well, they're just sweeping people up off the street. I saw something by Joe Rogan where he said, I'm like, Joe Rogan, you're a pussy. You're a weakling for that. Like, talking about how I don't agree with what ICE is doing now. People are like, they're the Gestapo. You're not the Gestapo. They're not the fucking Gestapo. They're doing their job. Unfortunately, they were told to stand down for years at a time. So now they have to do cleanup. They have to. It doesn't help when you have all these agitators, these leftist agitators on the streets, sitting there assaulting them in the middle of it. You are going to get shot. I know there's people all over. Like these Black Panther groups are trying to mobilize, and all these leftist agitator groups are trying to mobilize. And I saw some pictures of these guys wearing AR-15s. Like, all of a sudden the left is for gun rights now and assault weapons. But I noticed something. They're all like have 22 caliber ARs. You know, like the cheaper ones, they're like $300 that they're 22 caliber. Like, they're fucking tiny round. A pellet, essentially, like a high-speed pellet. So fuck yeah, but not like, you know, a real one. I'm like, do you not understand? Like, this is how stupid they are. This is actually how delusional leftists are. They think that they're going to stop federal agents who are kitted out with 5.56 AR-15s, and they have 22 caliber ARs. They probably don't even know the fucking difference. That's the thing I'm talking about. That's how delusional the left has become when it comes to immigration specifically on this. Like, it's like, dude, you're going to get yourself fucking killed. One day, you're going to go too far. And one of those people in a mob mentality is going to point that rifle towards an agent, and he's way better trained than you. He's way faster trained than you, and he has a bigger fucking round than you. And he's going to fucking ice you and your friends. You can't do that. You are purposefully escalating it. And this is why I go back to why communists, like understanding communist, like ideological constructs and how they actually propagandize things. This is literally textbook communism. It's you are the ones who escalate, and then when the supposed agitator, who's actually the victim, in this case like ICE officers who are being assaulted on the streets, when they react in a normal and justifiable way, you propagandize it to make that person who is the actual violator and the actual perpetrator, you try to make them the victim. We saw it with George Floyd. We saw it with Jacob Blake. We saw it with Breonna Taylor. We're seeing it now with that Renee chick. They're all trying to propagandize her. That is communism. It's literal Marxism. And that's how you know. Because you see the video and you're like, this lady was literally trying to run this guy over. I've seen the video like 16 times. Just on my feed alone. And every fucking time it's the same shit. I try to look for things where I'm like, okay, well, what did he do wrong? Like, bro, that man, she was spazzing out. She knew she had been caught. This is what happened. She knew she had been caught. She knew what had happened. She knew she was about to be arrested for impeding a federal investigation. So she hopped in her car and she tried to get the fuck out of there. When a cop got in front of her car to stop her, she pushed the freaking gas, and she knew what she was doing because she thought, oh, well, he'll get out of my way. That's assault. That's attempted vehicular homicide. Like, I still don't understand, because we sit here and everyone's like, again, it's the Marxist leftist agitator groups. They're still here trying to change the narrative behind that whole thing. It's like, that's not how that works at all. Like, this is George Floyd all over again. It's not going to get as much traction because everyone kind of figured out the whole George Floyd thing. You know, when all the coroner's reports came out and he died of fentanyl, 3 separate coroners literally confirmed that he was going to die anyway, and that it wasn't asphyxiation at all. And yes, Derek Chauvin is still in jail, by the way. Like, that's where we get. So it's that kind of shit and that kind of reaction to immigration that turns people off of you. And that's what I want leftists to really take away from this. You are wrong on the immigration thing. Period. Dot. It's not racism to enforce your border at all. We just happen to live in a country where our southern countries that are closest to our border are mainly brown. They're Hispanic. That's a reality. All right? But when you get people from all over the world going to those countries and then coming to the United States, there's an issue. That's an invasion. You have to come to terms with that, because you're going to keep losing this argument. You're going to keep losing this discussion on the national stage. All your leftist hack congressmen and congresswomen that sit here and try to make it sound like that, they're completely bought off, paid for. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know any of the data. So you have to change. This is like one of the big firebrand topics that I think the left need to hear it hard. Like, you are losing that debate. And I hope this video goes viral. I want this one, if all of them, if any of them go viral, this is the one I want. Because you're going to lose this. You need to either get on board with Republicans and be like, yeah, we need to have a strong border and we need to deport people who are here illegally. Period. Dot. Or you're opting for oblivion. Because you're going to lose that. All right? If you think that the vast majority of Americans, who, by the way, you are the minority now. Gen Z men overwhelmingly vote for Republican and conservative. Identify as conservative. 30% of women. Like, you're losing. And the boomers are dying off. The boomers now are mainly liberal. That's the crazy thing. Like, the boomers now are mainly liberal. You're dying off. That's why all those stupid No Kings protests, notice how they're all boomers. They're like all fat boomers with nothing else to do. And then like greasy, slovenly, young people who don't have anything else to do in their world. That's who you're dealing with. This is one of the topics that the right really needs to keep pounding, and they need to get offensive with. Like, I'm talking about blatantly offensive. You have to. You have to keep pushing and challenging the people. And I hope, like, young men, in college specifically, if you start having these liberal professors talk about this shit in a liberal way, you need to start challenging them. You have to. Because we need to reverse the narrative, and we need to be like, hey, you're fucking wrong. And you need to start shaming these people. It's period dot. Okay? Like, come on. They're literally storming churches in the middle of service. Like, what are you doing, dude? Hey, Don Lemon, if this gets to you, please, for the love of God, it is not your right, it's not your First Amendment right to break in and enter a church and invade a church and hold a service hostage. That is illegal on multiple different fronts. Like, they have a right to assembly. You are violating that right to assembly. It's not a right, like a right to protest, a right to freedom of speech that you're trying to use. Like, see, this is the problem with the leftists. The right has been using the right to free speech argument for years for everything that they've said. And for the most part, they've been relatively successful. The left is trying to use that now, and they're so bad at it. They think that protesting and rioting, they think that rioting and protesting are two the same thing. And they think that burning down or breaking into buildings is protesting. Straight up. Like, they think that that's okay. I'm like, dude, there's so many other ways that it's illegal. It's insane. Like, that's what I'm talking about, the delusion. Like, there is truly a cognitive dissonance on the left nowadays where they just don't get it. They do not understand. They truly think that they are these social justice crusaders. And in their mind, after years of indoctrination, go look at my first podcast where I talk about the vision of America and kind of where it came from. So much indoctrination to think that the right are these fascist Nazis. Again, look up the definition of fascism. They think that it's justified. They think it's justified to hunt them down in the streets. They think that. They think it's okay to hold you hostage. They think it's okay to do this. That's what the left thinks. Even if you're like a moderate and you're listening to this, that's the perception. And what is perception is reality. There's nothing fascist about the right. Literally. They're probably they're the farthest from total. If anything, the right is so far removed from big government. Like, the last thing they want is a bigger government with more control. That's the last thing they want. Overarching. You are far more totalitarian as a leftist today than the right is. By a metric mile. So, like, it's either you figure it out and you come around the border, you get your qualms under control with these protests because, again, you're not going to get the same luxury last time. People learned a lot from the Summer of Love, and they're not going to do that again. I promise you, you're going to get counter-protesters that are going to be armed to the fucking teeth. You're not going to survive that. Stop assaulting ICE agents in the street. It's fucking stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I know your liberal politicians claim they have your back. They don't. They just want votes because they know that if they sit there and tell you to stop, their hyper-leftist voting base is going to vote against them, so they want to stay in power. They know it's wrong too. Knock it off. Figure it the fuck out. So, anyway, I digress. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I know that was a little bit more firebrand than normal, but that one irks me, the immigration one, truly, because there's just so many facets that the left is wrong on, and they just refuse to see that. It's insane. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good night. I'm going to try to hit a couple more podcasts by the end of this week. I'm going to try to do the Friday whiskey one. If you are watching this, please like, subscribe. The more I get, the more I can get maybe more time to do more. And eventually I want to go on again doing live streams where I can actually get questions, questionnaires, and stuff like that in the comment section. Actually, almost like have a conversation with you guys. Both left and right. I want to have both in here. It defeats the purpose. It's just right. So recommend it to your families. This is a chill podcast. It's not to sit there and shame on everyone. It's sit there and to tell you the reality of the situation we live in. Because we have a lot of hysteria on both sides. And so I'm just tired of it. I can't do the hysteria anymore. So anyway, God bless. Have a good one. Good night.